our YouTube channel, hopefully in the next few days. So if you want to look back at anything that's been said today, you'll be able to do that. I think it looks like most people have joined. So I'm going to hand over to Una, and I'm going to let Una introduce herself. Just before I do that, just to say, I think it's fair to say, Una, you're keen to have questions and anything for this to be as interactive as possible. So if you use the chat facility to put any questions that you have, then we can put them to Una as we go along, or we can pick things up at the end, depending on what they are and how they fit in with what we're talking about. So yeah, so please do put things in the chat. Right, I'm gonna shut up now and hand over to Una. Okay, over to you, Una.
Oh, thank you so much, John, and thank you, Ruth, and the Huntington's Disease Association for inviting me to talk today with you, because I'm hoping it's not a talk to you, but with you, and that although I will have some hints and tips, I'm really looking for your ideas as well to share those amongst the people that are here. So please feel free to use the chat facility if you're familiar with that. There's a little sort of speech bubble toward the bottom. You can go into that and type in a question. I might be asking some questions during the presentation, and you can put your answers in there. So I'm going to share my screen now and introduce exactly who I am. I am Una Jones, and I am a lecturer in physiotherapy at Cardiff University. So I am a physiotherapist, and my research to date has been with people with Huntington's disease, and primarily looking at the best ways that we can promote physical activity. So how to keep active, what is the best way to do it? And when John and I were chatting last year, we thought that a webinar in January about, this is probably the third week in January, might be the best time, because those New Year's resolutions may be starting to fade at the minute. And this is a little boost to keep them going, at least through to February anyway. So the webinar today is really about living with Huntington's disease and keeping active, and the why and the how to keep active. So I hope you find it helpful. So as physiotherapists, we like to use this activity pyramid to describe the sorts of activities that you should do, and to get a big picture of physical activity. So, oops, sorry. I'm afraid my bottom, the biggest bit of the pyramid, which is obviously the most important, the grounding of the pyramid, is about moving more and sitting less. So examples of this are taking the stairs instead of the lift, parking your car slightly further away in the car park from the supermarket and walking a few more steps, walking up and down the stairs, just anything you can do to move more and sit less during the day. And that really is the foundation then of the pyramid. And then things that you don't need to do every day. So 3 to 5 times a week, thinking of doing aerobic activities. So things like long walks, working that little bit that your breathing gets a little bit harder, so you're actually getting a good effect. Cycling, swimming, and recreational sports, so anything like tennis, badminton, football, maybe potentially strenuous, depending on how hard you're going to go at it. And then 2 to 3 times a week, particularly thinking of stretching and strengthening, so setting up a regular strengthening program, and enjoying leisure activities, golf, bowling, gardening, things like that. And then the thing that we should be doing least of all is sitting. So sit as little as possible. So what I've got here in the middle, and I've used a couple of different words really, physical activity, exercise, sport, you know, do they all mean the same thing or not? Well, in fact, physical activity is sort of an umbrella term. It's any movement. So it's me moving my arms up and down in a chair, it's walking, it's everything, any movement. Exercise is structured and usually has a goal, so that you set up an exercise program and you think of how often you're going to do it, how hard you're going to work, the type of exercise that you're going to do, and how long you're going to do it for. Sport is exercise, but with rules. So I think you're all aware of different rules around sport. So sport and exercise sit underneath this big umbrella of physical activity. So my aim is always to try and increase physical activity under whatever way that might be. Just moving, doing exercise, or doing sport. So just to get you a little bit involved in the webinar, if you can use the chat facility, I won't use any names, don't worry. But does anybody know how much exercise that adults should do every week? And we think moderate to vigorous exercise. Does anybody know how much the World Health Organization says that we should do? If you can think of the number of minutes per week, pop it into the chat and I'll see 60 minutes we've got. Anything less? 150 maybe, another one higher? 90? Any other ideas of how much exercise we should do? Well, we've got one right answer in there, and that is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per week. So what does moderate to vigorous mean? How do you know what you're doing? Well, that's when your heart rate and your breathing rate rises a little bit. You can carry on a conversation, but so you may not be able to sing, but you could certainly chat as you're doing the activity. If it's intensive level, then you wouldn't be able to carry on a chat. But if you do intensive activity, you only need to do 75 minutes a week. So you got to take what you want to do there. So yes, 150 minutes. So that's 2.5 hours over 7 days. So what I'm going to do is talk about ways in which you might be able to achieve that. Now, obviously, people that are on the chat today will range from those who maybe have yet to have symptoms of Huntington's disease, maybe in the middle stages or the late stages. So we need to take that into consideration. If you're in the before symptoms, early, or even into the mid, you could still be doing 150 minutes of activity per week. But at the later stages, obviously, that wouldn't be possible. So yeah, we had a couple of more suggestions in there. Well done. We're all on the good end of activity there. So that's the advice. Why does the World Health Organization give that advice? Why do we need to keep active? And sort of everybody knows that it's a good thing, but why exactly? So according to the World Health Organization, there are a lot of benefits to keeping active. And in fact, there are a lot of disadvantages for not being active. So being active has general health benefits, so it helps in the prevention of diseases like heart disease and cancers. It's found to improve sleep, manage anxiety and depression, and overall improves a person's quality of life. So there are many, many studies that back up the benefits of physical activity and exercise. But what about for people with Huntington's disease? We can take these benefits on board, but specifically for people with Huntington's disease, the research that's out there says that exercise can improve balance confidence. So how confident you are in your balance, ability. So the more confident you are, the more able you might be to actually do your activities. Improve mobility, improved independence, and for any carers that are here on the webinar, that's important to them as well. So supporting people to be active so that they can stay as independent as long as possible. And also exercise can improve posture and breathing. And again, for any carers, we know that posture is important to be able to help with feeding and sitting. So physical activity and exercise can help with that. So we've got some very compelling evidence as to why people with Huntington's disease and people in general should be physically active. So this is where I'd like to have some of your experiences of keeping active, or your experiences of supporting someone to keep active. I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen so that when the chat comes up, I can see it, and I will come back to the screen. What I'd like you to do is to actually put in the chat what your experiences are of keeping active. What has worked well for you, or what do you find are the problems? If you're a carer, what are your experiences of supporting somebody to keep active? What's worked? What are the problems? I'm thinking really about moving more at home and moving more outside in terms of keeping active. So I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see the chat and not okay, so in the chat I've got somebody who's talking about early stage Huntington's and other chronic problems and long COVID. So they are major barriers to actually keeping active. And so the research really on activity with long COVID syndrome, it's just beginning to emerge now. And it is about working within your own capabilities. So we've got another query about motivation. So this is for somebody who has just finished working. So that's a massive change in your life, and keeping that motivation to keep active can be very difficult. Yes, yeah, so that's a challenge. So we got somebody recently diagnosed in the early stages. So this person can get their 10,000 steps in and get to the gym 3 to 5 times a week. So early stages, we're looking at something slightly different to maybe later stages in terms of keeping active. Oh, this is excellent. Somebody who does have limited mobility but manages 40 minutes walk every day, regardless of the weather. Has to be regardless of the weather in the United Kingdom, doesn't it? Because we do tend to have very, very wet weather. Also able to do a few minutes of exercise routines made up of suggestions from physios over the years. So that's great. That's sort of showing where support comes in. So giving that little bit of advice and then taking it on board within your own family. So that's lovely. Thank you very much for those. Any other thoughts on what works and what doesn't work? So we've got some challenges in terms of other conditions, challenges in changing lifestyle. And maybe the person that put in about the limited mobility, but the person's still able to do 40 minutes walking every day, is what motivates the person to do that? How do you actually achieve that? That would be lovely to hear if you could. Depression makes it very hard, yeah, and depression and people with Huntington's disease is very common. Somebody else is saying, yeah, motivation can be an issue, and the effort. Yes, I take that on board. The effort involved in exercise. Yes, there are an awful lot of challenges to keeping active when you've got Huntington's disease and when you've got any other chronic condition. And also there are challenges when you don't have any conditions as well. So it's trying to pull all those together and think, well, what could work for people with Huntington's disease. Okay, I'm going to go back and share my screen. Okay, thank you for the person who just explains. The person that walks 40 minutes a day loves being outside, loves saying hello, chatting with people, and then there's a toddler granddaughter with them, so that's very motivating as well. So that's a lovely story. I might come back to that again if that's okay, because what I want to talk about is what drives people to do things, and how to get over that depression, that apathy, how to build up the motivation. So hopefully we'll touch on that today, and that might help. So thank you for all of that. When I talk about physical activity, I do like to think about moving more at home and moving more outside. And I've worked with somebody to develop these pictures. These are not ones that I've drawn myself. And the one I probably love the most is this dancing picture, because I think that if you're in the kitchen preparing, or being with somebody preparing a meal, or as you're preparing a meal, or even just in the living room, dancing, getting up and dancing for 10 minutes to your favorite music. It could be ballroom, like Strictly Come Dancing. It could be rock. It could be folk music. Whatever it is actually getting up and dancing. And thinking about the activities that people can do in the home. So if you live in a house rather than a bungalow or a flat, we have inbuilt physical activity equipment. We've got stairs that you can use to walk up and down, to strengthen and keep your legs as strong as possible. You may be lucky enough to have a garden, or maybe just a window box, but actually doing some gardening. In fact, indoor gardening is becoming more popular, but just keeping active, keeping your arms moving. DIY, if it's safe, obviously. And my favorite is the dancing. I'm thinking more to outside, thinking about walking in the park. Being near water is supposed to be very therapeutic for somebody, and gives you a good feeling of well-being. And depending on your ability, whether you could hike or whether you could take up activities such as archery, or you've done that. So it's thinking about what works for you to keep you physically active. So lots of chat about what could be done, but I think one thing that might help overcome the challenges of motivation and apathy is actually setting goals for physical activity. And by setting the goal and writing it down or telling somebody, we'll be more likely to actually do it, rather than thinking about it, but it's actually writing it down and telling somebody can help. So how do you set a physical activity goal? Well, it is about thinking, and it's thinking about what's important to me. What do I want to be able to do? What do I do now? So it may be that you do nothing now, or that you do some things but you'd like to do more, or you might do something different. But the key thing is, what is important to me, and what would I like to be able to do? So thinking around those different elements, you can come up with setting a physical activity goal. So the goal could be that you'd like to be able to walk for 45 minutes 3 times a week. So that's a fairly average level goal. But you might set a goal that you want to be able to do a 5K in 6 months' time. So you might want to use something like Couch to 5K. You might want to do a marathon, or you might want to be able to walk around in the house that you have. You might be able to walk in a garden. You might want to be able to do some strengthening exercises. But what is it you want to do? And why do you want to do it? What's important? And if we think back to the example that was given to us, is that the person likes to be outside. So it could be that if your desire, what's important to you is being outside and seeing people or meeting people, well, that could be done in a gym. You can tag on physical activity into what is important for you. So you sort of tag together what's important for you, which might be having a coffee, but could you walk to the coffee shop to get it? So can you make a goal of what you'd like to do? And when making a goal, we need to think about, well, what is the advice? The advice is that we take 150 minutes physical activity every week. So 45 minutes walking 3 times a week would achieve that if we're walking, at a fairly good pace for you, that your heart rate's up a little bit. So actually setting those goals is a massive first step in getting physically active. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time now, a couple of minutes, where I would just like you to think about your own physical activity goal. I'll ask you to share, but you don't need to share with me, but it's just to get some examples from me. But what I'd like you to do is think about, if you're with somebody else, chat it through. So we've got a comment from somebody saying that the person that they care for, that their husband doesn't even want to discuss this. What can we do? And I think that's a very common challenge to people with Huntington's disease. And it's trying to work out the benefits of physical activity for the person, and the burden that might place upon you as a carer or a partner in trying to support that physical activity. So maybe it's about thinking, what is it that they would like to do? Maybe they would like to visit a coffee shop or a restaurant, or visit a shop, or to go somewhere, and that you can incorporate physical activity into it. And then, so I'll pull up some other ideas later on as how you can reinforce that. So somebody's saying they'd like to walk in nature more, in the woods and by the sea. So living in the outskirts of London, so there's lots of noise. Yes, I get that. Getting a gym membership. A goal is to be active during the day other than my workout session. So yes, maybe you're doing the workout, and there's quite a bit of evidence that's saying that actually sitting the rest of the day nearly cancels out the workout. And that's been a big problem during COVID, hasn't it, being able to sit during the day. So some general goals there. So yes, another goal is staying active enough to maintain independence and still being able to socialize. So that's really important. So maybe that is the hook, is to socialize, or the hook to become independent, upon which you can build the physical activity then. So let's go back and see, well, what else can we do now? Okay, so achieving that goal, how can you achieve it? So it's thinking about what's stopping you, what's stopping the person that you care for doing the goal. So is it apathy, which may be part of the condition and incredibly difficult to overcome? So is it planning? Because we know that people with Huntington's disease have difficulty planning. They've got more difficulties in planning, more difficulties in starting up new things than people who don't have Huntington's disease. So that planning phase may take a bit longer to get it going. Is it the movement problems? Is it the balance problems? So are there specific things that's stopping you? So rather than just saying, yes, I'm going to run a marathon, it's breaking that down to, well, what's stopping me from doing it? Let's be realistic in what we can achieve. So thinking about what is stopping you, what advice do you need then? So are there things that you need advice about? If it's the movement and the balance problems, do you need specific physiotherapy advice? Or if it's just about setting up a training program, so for those much earlier on in the condition or in the middle stages, is it about getting advice from a personal trainer at a gym, either a local council gym or one of the big branded gyms? People would be there to help you set that up. You may need advice from a HD advisor through the Huntington's Disease Association, or through the specialist HD clinic, the HD nurse. So you might need specific advice before you actually start off on your physical activity program. And obviously, if you're going to do exercise, then you need to make sure that you're able to do exercise. So you might want to have a quick check with your GP that you're fit enough to start exercise. And what support are you going to need to actually be able to do it? So obviously, we in the chat we hear that people are going out with their husbands, their wives, their partners. So the support of a partner might be really important. But there might also be support of people in your community. You know, maybe you want to walk more, so you can join a litter picking group to be able to do that. So you might get support from that group to be able to walk more, and it's got a purpose to it then as well, because having a purpose to physical activity really helps. So I'm just going to show you some resources that are actually available on the Huntington's Disease Association website and some other websites to help you with your exercise. Now, these are probably more, some of these are more suited to people in the middle to later stages. And there's lots of advice sort of on NHS websites, Couch to 5K and through Strava and other things to try and help you if you're up in the running, much more exertion, physical activity. But I'd like to show you the Move to Exercise DVD. The Move to Exercise DVD was developed by physiotherapists in Cardiff, and it's for people specifically with movement problems. So I'm just going to show you one of the exercises here. Here we are. This is the balance and coordination exercise.
Stand with the correct posture whilst completing these exercises. Ensure that you have a chair nearby that has a sturdy back support and that is placed level on the floor. The first exercise is standing with your feet together, first with your eyes open and then closed. Standing behind your chair, bring your feet as close together as you can. Stay standing in this position whilst trying to maintain your balance. If you feel comfortable in this position, close your eyes for up to 10 seconds. But be sure your hands are nearby the chair for support if you need it. If you feel yourself close to losing your balance, hold onto the chair and open your eyes.
So on this link, and this is available on the Huntington's Disease Association website, there's a big range. I think we've got about 5 sections of exercises that can be done in standing and sitting and at home. So this is about doing exercises at home. The other things that are available on the website are a physical activity workbook, and this goes through a little bit what I'm covering today, really. It's talking about the, let me see, it's in here somewhere, the pyramid of what to do, how, you know, and this booklet is really, if you want to use this with your physiotherapist to actually develop the goals. So you could have a look through this and then see if you can get referred to a physiotherapist who could take you through developing your physical activity goals. And then we have, this is called PAT-HD, Physical Activity Tool for Huntington's disease. You'll recognize the images that I've used. So it's just a paper thing that you can print out. It covers fairly much what we're covering today. Why to do exercise, the different types of exercise, and we think of fitness, strength, flexibility and balance. And then on the other side is the physical activity plan, which is what we've been going through together. So these resources are available on the HTA website. We've also got resources available on the Active Huntington's website. So again, that's taking you through different exercises. And if you really want to know why we're doing all of this, then we've got the physiotherapy guidelines that are available on the European Huntington's Disease Network. So once you set a goal, how do you go about putting that into action? So say the goal is that you'd like to be able to walk for 45 minutes 3 times a week. Well, you can't do that in the first week. It's important to start off gentle and build up what you're doing. So what will you do? Okay, so you could start walking for 10 minutes, take a rest, and walk back 10 minutes, and then increase the distance and decrease the rest over 4 weeks. So in 4 weeks' time, you'll be able to walk 45 minutes 3 times per week, or whatever your goal is. So how often will I do it? I'll start off twice a week and then increase to 3 times a week. How will I track my progress? Because it's important to log what you're doing, because that actually reinforces doing the physical activity. So most people, but not everybody, has a smartwatch, and on that there's often a step counter. And there are applications like Strava where you can log your activities and people can comment on them if that's what you like to do. But you could go for a very simple tracking, and that you could put up on the wall, this is your walking diary for this week. What did I do? When am I going to do it? How often am I going to do it? And did you do it? So you can tick it off. So it's breaking that goal down, starting off gentle and logging and recording to try and get that impetus to keep going. So here's some tips and hints from me. I'm going to look for some tips and hints from you as well as we go through. So it would be lovely to hear other people's tips and hints. So as I said, it's about setting a goal, writing it down, telling somebody about it. Start gentle and build up. Don't expect it to be achieved tomorrow or the next day. And also remember that in Huntington's disease, it takes longer to plan and get used to new activities. Once they're set up, then it's okay, but it will take longer to set them up than if you didn't have Huntington's disease. Using prompts. Now, a lot of smartwatches and smartphones, you can put alerts in that will remind you to do something. But it may be something as simple as when the news comes onto the radio or when a television program ends, I'm going to go and walk up and down the stairs. When the adverts come on in the program that you're watching, sit to stand 5 times, walk around the chair, walk up and down the stairs. That's moving more and sitting less. So it's using those prompts, or putting the diary up on the fridge or somewhere where you're going to see it to prompt you to do the activity. Now, thinking about how you feel before, during and after the activity might help with some of the problems that were mentioned earlier about just not wanting to talk about it. So if you can get somebody to do activity and then have a little think about how they felt, that they felt a little bit more inspired for being out and seeing the ducks in the park, or seeing somebody on the street, or having that cup of coffee made them feel better, then that can be used as a prompt to do more physical activity. So if you're feeling a bit lethargic beforehand, it feels a bit tough during it, but after the activity, you feel the benefit, whatever that benefit is to you. You might feel stronger, you might feel happier, you might feel more contented, less restless. So it's thinking about those and how they can reinforce what you're doing in your activity. And use support, and I mean this to the person with Huntington's disease, to use support that's there, practical and emotional. Use things like Strava to maybe get communities going, or litter picking groups, but also for carers to use support. So think of the HDA as a support mechanism as well. Think of your GP, your local areas of getting support that can help you through. Be kind to yourself as well. This isn't, there isn't a law that says you have to do this. This is a choice, but it is a healthy choice. But be kind to yourself about being physically active. Walk to the coffee shop. Give yourself a little treat every now and again. So depending on your finances, whether you could afford to buy a new t-shirt because you did more activity, whatever that is. And set new goals. Once you've achieved that first goal, think about setting another one. So I'd love to take your thoughts and questions now. I will stop sharing, I think, for now. I can put it back up again. I'm going to put my names up. So I hope that's been helpful in some way of thinking about physical activity in its bigger context, that it includes exercise and it includes sport. It's about moving more and sitting less. But how can you do that? Well, it's about setting goals, making those realistic, breaking the goals down. You know, you don't climb a mountain in one go, you take it a little step at a time. Taking time to plan, taking into consideration the apathy and lack of motivation and how those could be overcome, and how you could tag on things that are of interest to physical activity, which will make them more habit forming. So I'd love to take any questions now, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what I presented and whether you'd be able to use that within your life. So yes, the $1 million question here is there any evidence that regular exercise slows down the progression of Huntington's disease? We don't have that answer yet. It certainly helps to improve independence, so it may not change. So when you go to HD clinic and you have all your assessments taken, it may not change those, but it might help with improving independence. Therefore, it's not slowing the disease, but helping you cope with the disease better. So we don't have that evidence yet. There's some evidence in animal studies that living in an enriched environment certainly can delay onset or slow the progression, but we haven't got that evidence in humans yet. So we've got somebody's first time on a call. So welcome to any newcomers, and do feel free to ask any questions. Okay, so we've got somebody who likes the idea of getting up and moving during adverts. So somebody who listens a lot to music, mostly on the internet radio. So obviously there'll be advert breaks and that. So yes, listening to the radio, even when the news comes on, when the travel bulletin comes on. So yes, I think that's one way of sort of prompting people to get up and move around so that you don't become seated.
Una, just while waiting for other questions, I'm just wondering, and I wonder whether some people have it about, people who are at the gym and about getting advice from people who have Huntington's who go to the gym. Is it all right to get advice from the workers at the gym, or do people need specific Huntington's advice? I think that I was just wondering whether that might be a bit of a barrier, and what you thought about that.
Yes, that's a really good question, John. And it really depends on the gym and the personal trainer and the problems that the person with Huntington's has. So if you're sort of pre-symptomatic or very early, it shouldn't make much difference to what you can do in the gym. You could follow an organized routine. If you as a person felt that you had some balance problems, so maybe getting on a bike or things like that may be difficult, then it might be worthwhile chatting to the personal trainer at the gym and seeing do they have any experience of Huntington's disease, and then maybe signing the personal trainer to the HDA so that they can learn more about it, or to physiotherapists. So it can sometimes be that combination of things as well. So I certainly wouldn't deter people with Huntington's disease from going to a gym. I think it would be really good because you get the social side of it as well, but you may need some additional support.
Thank you.
So any particular type of exercise that I would recommend, or is it purely about moving the body? Well, I would say, again, it depends on what stage you're at. I would advise doing some aerobic exercise, so trying to get your heart rate up a little bit, trying to get your breathing rate up a bit. And again, that's that 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity. And that can be anything like vigorous walking, running, cycling, swimming, any sort of sport that does that. But I would also increase some flexibility and strength training. So flexibility is very important, I think, particularly around the shoulders and the hips, because if you're going into middle to late stage, being able to keep your shoulders flexible will really help with dressing. And again, being flexible around hips, getting socks on and things like that. So maybe using yoga or something like that, getting into a habit of yoga to improve flexibility. And then within the Move to Exercise videos, there are some strengthening exercises there where you can just use, actually the lid's on this, water bottles filled as some sort of weights to do exercises. Okay, so this person does weight training at the gym, that's really good, and yoga for flexibility. I think that combination is really, really good, plus some aerobic exercise.
I think there's a question in the question and answers as well, saying, are yoga and the more static exercise programs for strength and balance a good idea? And then, I think you've just answered that one. So
right.
I think you may have answered it as that question was being typed.
Okay. Just as people are beginning to put in some ideas there, I'd like to tell you about a couple of things that we're doing at Cardiff University. One is my next study, which has been funded, and I'm working with the Huntington's Disease Association to design a pack for carers so that they have support in supporting the person they care with become physically active. So what we want to know is what support do carers need, and what would a training package look like that would help you support somebody with Huntington's disease be physically active. So we're running some workshops in March. So some of them will be online, and we're hoping one might be in person, fingers crossed. If things change with restrictions, we'll go back online again. So if you're interested in doing being part of that study, just get in touch with me. I'll put up my email address at the end. And the other thing is that a colleague of mine, Katie Hamana, who also has done research in Huntington's disease and physical activity, she teaches on a master's program, and what she's looking for are what we call expert patients, because people with diseases are the absolute experts in those conditions. So it could be somebody with Huntington's disease or a carer. And if you'd be willing to talk to students about physical activity, about taking part in physical activity, then we'd love to hear from you. Again, that would be on Zoom. And you'd be given all the questions beforehand. So you'd be in a little breakout room with about 8 people, and they would ask questions, but you'd be given those beforehand. So if anybody's interested in helping us here at Cardiff with those 2 projects, then do please get in touch. Okay, so this is a really big challenge. The next question. So somebody's not particularly worried about the person's physical health. It's more the cognitive health that could be a problem. And that is incredibly complex. So we do know that being physically active can actually help with cognitive health and mental health. So actually those 2 things combine. So I'm not sure if this person is physically active or just doesn't have any physical health problems, but that cognitive health is a problem. So it's thinking about, well, what are the cognitive issues? Is it planning? Is it apathy? Is it aggression? Is it irritation? And then it's maybe getting specific advice from a HD advisor alongside a physiotherapist as to what would be the best way to manage that.
The other thing that Una would say is if people have, when you were saying about the research, if just to say that if people, forget who to contact, they can always contact us at the Huntington's Disease Association when we'll point you in the right direction. So if you do miss the email addresses and things at the end, then you can always just get in touch with the Huntington's Disease Association, and we'll put you in touch with Una.
That would be lovely, thank you. And if anybody would just like to talk to me individually about maybe, we can talk through the physical activity tool and develop some goals. I can help you with developing goals, or I can put you in touch with people in the area.
Yeah, Great.
And just if you're watching this webinar, we're looking for people for the project between January and March 2022. So if it's after that date when you're watching it, you can still get in touch and see what we're doing.
Great. Well, I think that looks like that's all the questions I've got. And really, just to say to anyone, if you've any of the resources I've mentioned or anything we've mentioned this afternoon, if you've forgotten where it is or what it is, or please just get in touch with us, the Huntington's Disease Association head office, and we'll point you in the right direction. Okay, well, I think all that remains to say is thank you very much, Una. I think it looks like that's been very helpful to people. I can see there's been quite a lot of response in terms of people contributing in terms of their own experiences, which is lovely and what we'd love to see. We've just got a few messages there just saying thank you, so that's great.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, John and Ruth, for inviting me today. I've really enjoyed it.